Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. After a slight hiatus and a lot of personal things going on, I'm back at you with the new Roundup for going into the fall. 6 albums, really quick overviews of these albums I've just been listening to for the past month. So let's go and get started on it. First one is Porcupine Trees, Closure Continuation. After a 12-year hiatus, the celebrated progressive rock band Porcupine Tree got back together and unexpectedly created this album, really right on the heels of last year's solo album by Steven Wilson. And to hear Steven Wilson tell the tale, he came to Porcupine Tree in this setting a bit more collaboratively than he's known for in the past. He's always given the sense that he's very in control of what happens at Porcupine Tree, but with a solo career kind of in check for himself, he was able to come in and kind of let the band, the other guys in the group, have their voices contribute more, not just in terms of their playing and their musicianship, but also in the composition of the songs. I gotta say, this collaborative approach really let this album stand out in ways that a lot of other Porcupine Tree albums in the past have not. If you're a person that's been kind of curious as to whether, how this stacks up in the big picture with Porcupine Tree, I can say it's probably not as great as their sort of mid-aughts work, when you're talking about like Dead Wing and In Absentia and that stuff, but maybe just a notch down from that. And I really am glad to see Steven Wilson playing guitar again, even though he's kind of reticent to admit that he enjoys playing guitar right now. And it's also really great to hear Gavin Harrison coming fresh off of a big run of playing with King Crimson. His chops are amazing right now. And I think that his experience with King Crimson has influenced the compositional aspects of this album to a degree. And of course, you can't overlook Richard Barbieri. He's a venerated musician with a very long history as a founding member of Japan, who was a group that had a very big influence on what was going to be happening with the 80s, both visually and musically. So strong musicianship across the board. It's great to hear these guys' voices come out in the context of this album. When you're a really outstanding musician and you're sort of trying to pay homage to your influences, it's sometimes very difficult to reinterpret those influences in a way that the average person can hear. Sometimes it's hard to say, well, this is a part that probably was influenced by his love of Rush's music. Well, it sounds almost like Rush, almost exactly. But that all being said, it still recombines in ways that's new and different, and Steven Wilson's songwriting is very unique and very distinctive, and his use of melody and harmony are bar none, but top notch, and they were really expressing themselves well in this album. So hopefully this is not a closure, but a continuation of the Porcupine Tree catalog. Next up I got Avalanche Kaito with their self-titled full-length debut. Very fascinating group, Avalanche Kaito, and another example of a really great intercultural exchange that produces something really new. 2/3 of Avalanche Kaito is kind of like this post-punk noise rock duo, drummer and guitar player. But the third person in Avalanche Kaito is a Burkanian African urban griot, which means he's part of a long tradition of music, and his style of playing is a current iteration of that tradition. And as such, he plays a wide variety of instruments. He plays some talking drum, he plays some flute, he plays a musical bow. And I gotta say, these two styles mesh together so incredibly well, really do synergize in a really compelling way. If you're looking for concise songwriting, you're not really going to find that as much on this album, but certainly there's a lot of really exciting music, and really another situation where you have two distinct styles of music who never really give up their separate identities, but create something really new and really cohesive in the commingling of these styles. Next up I got Sault's Air. In the year 2020, they released a couple of albums that were really very expressive of the cultural and racial tensions that were going on. And they're fantastic albums with a lot of stylistic diversity while still being very cohesive, kind of avant R&B type albums. But then this album comes out, and it's all wordless orchestral and choral music, with some exceptions. There are some lyrics, a couple of spots in the album, but overall, it presents itself as this big orchestral work. So that by itself is a really huge surprise. On top of that, Sault is very anonymous in the way that they present themselves. They don't do interviews. They don't take pictures. They don't announce when they're releasing their music. They just put it out there. And what I think is really interesting about this is that so much of their music has been a commentary on the black condition. I really wonder what they're trying to say on this album. I think that there's a statement that they're trying to make here. And what's beautiful about it is they will not tell what that statement is. They're leaving it entirely up to the listener. So I'm not going to tell you what I think it is. I want you to check it out and figure it out for yourself. But it's extremely curious and extremely interesting, and ultimately a really great recording. To it the other day in the car with my parents. They were like, it sounds like the Journey of the Center of the Earth with Rick Wakeman. And a lot of the arranging kind of does harken back to that kind of choral orchestral work. So very interesting album, well worth investigating and contemplating its meaning. Next up I've got Goro Yamaguchi's Kinkoryu Shakuhachi. You may or may not know this, but I have studied shakuhachi in the past. And when you listen to this, the opening sort of bumper that I have at the beginning of this, that shakuhachi sound is me playing. I've studied some. And one of the things I've been sort of lamenting about my relationship with my music and the blog and everything is I haven't been really connecting with the music that I listen to in a practical way recently. So I'm trying to make an effort this fall to get into some music that relates to things that I know to play and try to make some connections there. And this is an effort to do that. And the reason why this was particularly important is Goro Yamaguchi is a famed shakuhachi player and kind of a big figure in the Kinkoryu school, which is the style that I trained under. This has 4 recordings on it, all fantastic. Now, of course, a whole album's worth of shakuhachi music can be an acquired taste. So if you don't have your ear wrapped around this music and how it works, it may be kind of a tricky listen, but some familiarity with the music really shows the mastery that Yamaguchi has in this album. His ability to play the wood on the instrument. There's a term when you're playing shakuhachi where there's a certain amount of breathiness that's characteristic on the instrument. You don't really want a pure tone like you have normally with like a Western flute. And his ability to play with that edge of the sound where it almost trails off into white noise, but still has a tone and still has a force to it, is magical. It's unbelievable that he's able to do what he's done, but not unbelievable because he's Goro Yamaguchi, because these recordings are pristine examples of his playing. It shouldn't really be a surprise to anyone. Okay, next up I've got Fantastic Negrito's White Jesus Black Problems. Another great album from Fantastic Negrito. This one kind of plays itself out a little bit more like a concept album. And I can't really attest to the concept just yet. I need to really sit down with the lyrics and go through and make sure I understand if that's really the case. But it does feel like there's sort of a narrative, if not a storyline, at least a narrative that goes throughout this album that kind of weaves the whole thing together. But really, again, what drives the whole thing along is Fantastic Negrito's very unique kind of psychedelic pop spirituals. What he does is very, very solidly grounded in African-American traditions, especially spirituals and especially the blues, but also has the sheen of the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's and that sort of thing. this album, there's so many details and there's so many kind of avenues that he takes that make the whole experience richer. It doesn't really feel quite as obvious sometimes as some of the other work that I've heard from him. So I think this is a great thing, and I think that there's something special going on with this album. I just haven't quite unearthed it yet. I'm looking forward to doing so further in the very near future. And finally, Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. A highly anticipated release from critically acclaimed and highly venerated hip-hop and rap artist Kendrick Lamar. There was so much hype and so much anticipation surrounding this album. Of course, it's another situation, not unlike the Porcupine Tree, where you got to wonder if it lives up to the hype. Is Kendrick able to continually push the boundaries of hip-hop and rap into something new without actually turning it into something that maybe isn't hip-hop? I think that Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is actually stepping into something different, something new. Almost kind of feels like in the same way that last year Bo Burnham did with Inside, because the way that this album navigates hip-hop and commentary, social commentary, and self-confessional, is one of these things I think that maybe a direction that a lot of artists are taking post-COVID, post-lockdown. The album is extremely introspective and very, very personal. It talks about a lot of the things that Kendrick Lamar has dealt with in the past few years personally, but life issues that Kendrick has dealt with through self-reflection and through therapy. And he shares it all with the listener. And I had a friend of mine who, when I was asking what he thought of this album, he said that I can't get through the album without crying about it. And after listening to it some, I can see that. There's something very, very emotionally moving about this album that I think is unique, again, very distinctive.
Well, you're back outside, but they still lied. Whoa, yeah.
Take off the foo-foo, take off the cloud chase, take off the Wi-Fi, take off the money phone, take off the car loan, take off the flex and the white loss, take off the weird-ass jewelry, I'ma take 10 steps, then I'm taking off top 5. Take off them fabricate streams and the microwave memes, it's a real world outside. Take off your idols, take off the runway, take off the Cairo, take off the Sandro Pay, 5-day stay, take a quarter meal, hella follow.
Now, Kendrick Lamar is one of these kinds of rappers where he doesn't really dig into the beat as much as he could. He doesn't subdivide things very, very strictly whenever he's rapping. He's more of the kind of guy that thinks about phrasing and trying to get phrasing to line up, but he doesn't completely dismiss the beat or the pulse or the groove. But instead, he's able to emphasize the natural rhythm of speech and kind of still make it work within the beat, not really changing the rhythm of the speech to lock it into the subdivisions, but is able to play with the groove and the natural nuance and cadence of his voice and his words that allows it to play with the beat in kind of a unique way. It starts to feel a little bit almost like a spoken word album, and that's not really a criticism because hip hop and rap always plays with that. But because of his ability to just almost plainly speak but still stay in rhythm, it really does start to feel like a time to time that he's getting into that. Plus, again, you're talking about greater and thicker orchestrations and more singing. Kendrick does more singing on this album, and I think it's very, very successful. Parts of it kind of get almost into feeling like a Von Iver album. So if that makes you curious about what's going on with this one, definitely check it out. And hold on to your hats, dig into what he's trying to say, because I think it's important. I think he's really putting himself out there in the creation and the expression on this album. Okay, that's all I got for this roundup. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really want to encourage you to go out and check out music by these artists. Buy from the artist. If you buy MP3s, buy MP3s directly from the artist, buy hard copy, whatever. But support the artist, again, because they need our support even going on. These albums are going to be going up against the whole new round of eliminations coming up in another month or so. I just did a Tier 5 elimination, which is all the things that were left over from Tier 1. So if you're curious about that, that's back over on my blog. I have a link to that down in the comments. But if you want to know about more videos, please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends. Follow me over on Spotify. I'm making a comprehensive playlist of everything I posted about this year, so check that out. And until see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah.